more you really find yourself, the more you really are. So being the real you is the most important thing. Hi, today I want to talk about Alan Watts and his perspectives on being you, the real you. Who is the real you, and how can you be the real you? Alan Watts was a Buddhist, and his philosophical views are obviously Buddhistic. And what we have to understand when we're thinking of Alan Watts and his view on reality and who the real person is, we have to understand that it's a non-dualistic system. So whereas, say for example, in the Abrahamic religions, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they will tend to have a monastic God. We are created by God, but outside of God, and there's a lot of rules and regulations, and it's very perhaps objective set of rules, and a kind of abstract, a kind of discrete way of moving things. I mean discrete in the sense of not the sense of subtle that we think of, let's have a discrete conversation, but discrete more in the sense of science, which is very distinct rules, regulations, and places. And Buddhism is quite different. Buddhism really doesn't see a beginning or an end. If we look at Chinese medicine, for example, the concepts are yin and yang. And basically the idea is everything is a spectrum. For example, I'm sitting here in this room, and beside me this is a bass bin for my sound system. And the Chinese Buddhistic viewpoint would be that this is the same as the air I'm breathing and the thoughts in my head. The difference is the spectrum. This is solid, the air is gaseous, and my ideas are ideational. So everything is a mixture of yang and yin, and yin is the nurturing energy and yang is the active energy. And I suppose when this theory first came out many thousands of years ago, it probably sounds to a lot of people kind of crazy, but it's been backed by science in the last century. With the advent of nuclear physics, we start to see that, yeah, there ain't really a difference between this and the air or my thoughts. They're all related. They're all atoms or vibrations or some kind of, what's physical things? Well, physical things are things which are actually atoms vibrating. And apparently you never really touch anything. There's always a few electrons between any two things touching. So what is physical reality really? So in that sense, from a nuclear physics point of view, actually everything is a vibration of atoms. Now, of course, we have to spread it out and think of thoughts. What are thoughts really? Because is it just brain cells? Well, we know we have a brain, but are the thoughts coming from the brain? We know if you damage the brain, you have difficulty thinking. But is that you have difficulty thinking, or your vessel, the vehicle you're using to express yourself to the world, it has difficulty thinking? So it's a moot point, because although they can see electrical activity in the brain, they can't actually see thoughts as of yet. So, and there has been some very unusual things have happened. For example, some neuroscientists and neurologists and so on have noted that patients at the moment of death, even though they might have severe brain damage, there has been cases where they've suddenly sat up and had a conversation with their family and then they died. How is that possible if the thoughts are just coming from the brain? So what exactly are thoughts? Are they atomic? Are they vibrations? And I think the idea of a vibrational theory is much more closely allied to the Eastern esoteric viewpoint, or the Buddhistic viewpoint as one aspect of it, is really the idea that everything is a vibration and there really is only one source. This is where Alan Watts really talks a lot about the nature of who you really are. And what he proposes is that the nature of who you are is that there's only one being in the universe. And we're all part of that one being. Now, Buddhists hate to describe what that being is, which, if like me, I was raised as a Roman Catholic Christian, so it's difficult to deal with concepts which are so vague, when in Christianity, for example, we're given things which are so solid. But basically, the idea is that it's very similar to the Christian idea that God is one. Saint Aquinas, the great theologian, said that human beings are thoughts in the mind of God. They were all created by God. So it's actually very similar, but the language they use is different in Buddhism because they don't like to say about anything specifically. And this is where the Western mindset is different from the Eastern mindset. And an interesting thing with Alan Watts is that although he was a Western man, his mindset was Eastern. But the Western side of him was that he was very good at describing that, where in general, and most Eastern teachers could never express it so lucidly as Alan Watts. And that's the greatness of Alan Watts, that Western ability to categorize, break things down, and express them in a logical, rational way. That's Alan Watts. But the philosophy is actually the Eastern philosophy. So what exactly is Alan Watts getting at here when he says that like everything is one? The human mind, the human being is a hoax, everything is a sham. What he's basically, first of all, you have to understand that he believes in reincarnation. And the idea that everything is an expression of God, so it's a manifestation of God. But like I said, the Buddhists think they don't like really describing God. They just see it's oneness, there's a consciousness, there's a something. And he would believe, or he believes, because he's passed away now, he believed that you live for a certain time and then you die and then you're reborn, you're reincarnated, your consciousness continues in some way or another. And he believes that really we're held back by the fear of death, and that if we can get our head around that all is one. He talks about crests and waves. So, the wave is a peak, the crest is a peak, and then you have a trough. And the trough is the lower level. So you got the yang, which is the active, and the yin, which is inactive. The yang is masculine, the yin is nurturing. Okay? So that when we start to see that bigger perspective, we become philosophical and realize that everybody's part of the one being and that we're always going to return. So there's no need to be afraid of things like death. And there's no need to worry about anything specifically. Externally we'll worry, externally we'll be stressed, but deep down we can have an inner sense of peace and an inner sense of calm, because all is one and all is an expression. And we can take it a bit further and talk about manifest and unmanifest. And maybe he doesn't say it so much specifically in his speeches, but he's describing it, which is basically you've got God, which is the unmanifest, and the universe, which is the manifest. And that we go through stages of manifestation and unmanifestation, but the consciousness, that underlying something, which in the Western world we tend to describe as God, and in the esoteric, the Eastern mindset, they would tend to describe as all is just part of this one something, whatever that is, that consciousness. We're a small consciousness, it's a big consciousness. We're a drop of water in the ocean, it is the ocean. I like it, it's a different way of thinking, but it's hard for us to describe from a Western point of view. So once you understand the oneness and that you're part of the oneness, you're an expression of the oneness, you're never going to die because you're never created in the first place. You're an aspect of this thing which is always has and always will be. There was a English mystic, maybe it's 13th or 14th century, Julian of Norwich. And Julian of Norwich's famous saying is, all was good, all is good, and all will be good. And the whole idea of faith in God, that all was, is, and will be. When we take the desire out, we take the aspiration out, we just accept the reality. And this is the real you. The real you is that you're actually cosmic you. You're a bigger, wider version of who you think you are. This is the real you. And so it's an illusion, in Alan Watts' opinion, that you're really the identity that you have right now. It's something you buy into. It's an illusion that we're here on this planet. We are here physically on this planet, but it's also an illusion in the sense that when we are created beings, we tend to feel that there's a difference between us and that other consciousness, which Western mindset would describe as God. Eastern mindset would just talk about in various metaphysical, metaphorical ways about this bigger cosmic version. It's an illusion that we're separate. You're not separate. And that's why if you look at every religion in the world, they'll talk about God, and God is always with you. Remember me and I'm here, if we think of in terms of Christianity. Hindus also have this and the idea of Krishna consciousness. In other words, you can't be separate. You just think you're separate because you have an identity, and that identity is separateness, but you're not really separate. And I think that's the real take-home message of what Alan Watts is trying to say, is that the real you is eternal. The real you is beyond just your physical incarnation here on this earth. So this thing of chasing success is like a hamster on a wheel. You never really have it anyway. It's an illusion. A movie star is so successful, but only for a few years, and then nobody wants to get to work anymore. So everything has a shelf life in this earthly plane. But the only thing that doesn't have a shelf life is the real you, who you really are. This is where Alan Watts is very good. Because Alan Watts did not restrict himself to any one particular belief system, although he's basically expressing a Buddhistic view of life. He wasn't labeling it. He was giving something that's common sense, and you probably like Alan Watts because he resonates with you, because it seems he's some kind of inherent truth. You can't prove it, but it makes a lot of sense in the real world. Because if we're just going by trying to be worldly successful, it is a sham, it is a hoax. But if we go in the opposite way and try and find who I really am, and then we start finding that although I am perhaps in this earth plane finite, I have a certain shelf life, but the who I am seems to have something that's metaphorical, something that goes beyond the shelf life, something that goes beyond the limited moment in time. And that's the true essence of who I am. And that's what I feel, I'm speculating a bit here, but I feel Alan Watts is probably really trying to get at, is that there is some, although you're just an expression of something, you're a manifestation, a momentary wave, and then you're a trough and a wave again. But there is something special about you if you find that. If you're going for trying to win the world over, well, if you're chasing the world, you're chasing illusion. Because what's popular today is not popular tomorrow. What's successful today won't make you successful tomorrow. Even if you get power and success, how long can you hold it before you lose it? But if you start finding out who you really are, and this is based more on the principle that you're created by God or some consciousness or something above and beyond, and there actually is something unique about you and eternal that goes beyond this lifetime, pre-life, post-life. That's a very interesting concept indeed. And that's the concept of a unique individuality who is created by some greater being and truly is special regardless of wealth or historical period or success in life. There's something that makes you special. And some people close to you might feel it. Family members, friends, loved ones. They might feel there's something special about you. And who knows, you might feel there's something special about you. Something that doesn't matter that you only live for a certain time here and now, but something about you that transcends time and space. And I would argue that what transcends time and space is the real you. The real you is special. And if we believe that there's a God or creator or some higher transpersonal being out there, then it makes sense that the created reflects the creator. And then if the created tries to find out who they really are, then they become more like the Creator. Now, this is a kind of an Eastern concept, and this is very much a concept that Alan Watts and many other Eastern teachers will be following. Maybe less so Western teachers and Western philosophy, because the principle is that rather than I forget me and try to become like God, which is the Western philosophy, the philosophy is I just try and forget the false me. I try and forget the external ego me and try and find out who the real me is. And you try and find out the real me is what? The real me was created by God. And the real me is perfect. So my inner perfection is finding out who I really am, but not on an ego level. And I think that's a very fascinating idea. And that's what I would strongly suggest to you, that if you want to be happy, possibly successful, because success is always fleeting, but if you want to be happy and content at a deeper level, you need to find out who the transpersonal version of yourself is, which means that you need to find out who you really are. Who is the I, not the me. The me is an ego and has many limitations. But who am I? Really, who am I? So who are you? And if you start asking that question and try to become who you really are, beyond the ego, beyond the body, gender, ethnicity, wealth, and all that, but who is the essence of who is inside here? Who is that immortal being? Then you will have divinity. And I feel that's, roughly speaking, although you mightn't have said it quite like that, it is my interpretation on top, but that's the rough direction he's talking about, is find out who you really are, because who you really are is transpersonal and eternal and infinite, and you'll be a lot happier and closer to God, or this eternal being, or this expression of the infinite. The more you really find yourself, the more you really are. So being the real you is the most important thing, and that might take a lifetime, but that is the most important thing you can be, because all you really are is who you are, which is you. You think of it that way. Okay, hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe if you do. I'll talk to you next time.